What if I'm talking about hip-hop? Well, I guess I'll have to start off with a little rhyme and wordplay, so sit back and take your guards off. Take all of your inferences and preconceived notions, lock them in a safe, throw them deep into an ocean, cause hip-hop's not money, drugs, cars. Hip-hop's the truth, struggle, and passion that you put inside your bars. Hip-hop is poetry in its truest form, so when people rap, it can easily transform into something positive and influential to the max. Listen to my presentation, just sit back, relax. My name's Noah Lennon, and I've loved hip-hop since I was 12 years old. I'm a hip-hop artist, and one of my favorite things to do is kind of debunk the negative stereotypes about hip-hop. So I'm going to do that today in 3 ways, the 3 Ps of hip-hop. Poetry, positive, powerful. First P, poetry. We're going to play a little word game here. I'm going to tell you guys a quote, and you guys are going to, I'm going to get feedback from you guys whether you think it's poetry or whether you think that it's hip-hop. So the first quote. Then I ran across this memory and it stung the brain. How can you ever destroy the beauty from which one came? Raise your hand if you think that's hip-hop. Raise your hand if you think it's poetry. It's actually by a man named Sean Carter, better known as Jay-Z. That's hip-hop. Second quote. I was not born under a rhyming planet. Who thinks that's hip-hop? Poetry? It's William Shakespeare, Much Ado About Nothing. Maybe it's hatred I spew, maybe it's food for the spirit. Who thinks that's hip-hop? Who thinks that's poetry? Cool, Rodney, ruined it. That's by Marshall Mathers, better known as Eminem, hip-hop. The most benevolent of kings communicates through your dreams. Who thinks that's hip-hop? And who thinks that's poetry? Apparently not a lot of Wu-Tang Clan fans in here. That's hip-hop. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Who thinks that's hip-hop? Who thinks that's poetry? It's by Langston Hughes. That's poetry. So what am I getting at here? What I'm trying to say is I think that one of the keys to looking at poetry as a positive force is to view hip-hop as a positive force, is to view hip-hop as much as a form of literature as it is a form of music. And why is this important? Because I think that people that aren't able to see hip-hop as a positive force could maybe be swayed because no one really questions whether or not literature is a positive force or can be powerful. So my history with hip-hop. I was always kind of skeptical and wondered why people thought that hip-hop was such a negative force and why the news always portrayed it so negatively and why parents didn't want their children listening to that sort of music. Especially in white culture, it was something that you grew up, it was kind of vilified. And they often claimed that it promoted violence and misogyny and drug use, and they really were right. You know, a lot of popular hip-hop then, and now still today, you know, talks about getting high and talks about committing crimes. And as I got older, I grew out of that sort of hip-hop and I started listening to guys like Lupe Fiasco, Aesop Rock, Atmosphere, Common, Macklemore. These guys talked about real issues, you know, issues, political, social, economic issues. There's struggles with drugs and alcohol. Often rappers that are like this are called conscious rappers. That term's always really bothered me. As if rappers by default are supposed to be unconscious or oblivious to social, racial, and political issues. Like, it should be abnormal to address these real world problems. And I think that part of the reason why hip-hop isn't a big enough positive force is because we label them these ways. You know, labeling these rappers as such can lead the listeners and the children to kind of check out to political and social and racial issues. I think I think one of the keys to looking at hip-hop as a positive force is obviously looking at content. There you go. Macklemore is one of my favorite hip-hop artists. He's always been an inspiration to me. And by always, I mean like I've only been listening to him for like 3 years. But for the last 3 years, I've really kind of grown to admire the way he connects good sounding hip hop with good messages as well. He's gotten famous recently for songs like Thrift Shop, which talks about getting secondhand, all your styles from secondhand stores, and Same Love, which is an emotional testimony in favor of marriage equality. There's another rapper named Lupe Fiasco that has a song called Dumb It Down, which talks about the record label and his friends and his family and his manager all telling him that he needs to dumb down his music, don't talk about the political issues, and talk about misogyny, spending money, being in the club. He also has a song called Bitch Bad, in which he talks about the use of the word bitch in hip hop and the negative effects it has on youth and relationships with women. I think besides content, another key to looking at hip hop as a positive force is to look at its origins. Hip hop started in the Bronx in the 1970s as a tool for communal empowerment. It was a form of personal expression that everyone could really connect with. The principles of struggle, hardship, and triumph were throughout. And a lot of times I think people are confused as to whether something is hip hop or rap. A lot of times people kind of put those two words as the exact same thing, and they aren't. Rap is only one of 5 elements of hip hop. First being rap, obviously, or MCing, DJing, graffiti, breakdancing, and beatboxing. And all of these combine together to create a culture of expression. Hip hop emerged from a community of those who had been marginalized and alienated, and it was a way for them to connect. Macklemore has a quote in his song called I Said Hey, and it goes as follows. This is it, when you spit, you exist in that moment, and if you're sick with that gift and you rip it when you perform it, then all the stuff that you live begins to lift off your shoulders, and the audience gets to experience where your soul is. And I think this is kind of a good example of personal expression leading to communal empowerment. This is a list of some of my heroes. Macklemore I've already talked about. I would go into farther detail, but my time's running low. So this is just a list of people that have some really powerful songs. I'll talk about one. Fort Minor. Mike Shinoda was the rapper from Linkin Park. Linkin Park was a big group in the early 2000s. In 2005, he split off and started a group, or a solo project called Fort Minor. As Fort Minor, talks about a lot of political and social issues. He has a song called Kenji, in which he talks about the plight of Japanese Americans in World War II internment camps. And he actually is a Japanese American, so it's very personal, and it talks about his grandparents and their experience. And this is a good example of a hip hop artist speaking for a voice that isn't usually spoken for in hip hop. So what can we do? You know, I've talked about hip hop being powerful, I've talked about it being positive, but what can we do to make it a positive force in today's society? Support these positive artists, you know, make the conscious rappers the mainstream. The only reason why negative hip hop artists are continually making this music is because we give them the money to do it. We put them on the radio, we buy their albums, and it reinforces the view that if they make this music, they can continue to live this lifestyle. Macklemore has a quote, once again quoting Macklemore. He kind of talks about this whole thing all the time in his songs, so it's perfect. And if you want to, you can go and label me conscious, but remember there's a kid at a bus stop beatboxing whose life's gonna be affected by what's inside of his Walkman. And I think that kind of goes to show that a lot of hip hop artists don't really realize the power that they have through their words. Also, speak out against these stereotypes about hip hop. You know, there are tons of positive artists, and a lot of people don't realize that. And I think all it takes is someone going, no, actually, hip hop isn't about drugs, and isn't about cars, it isn't about using, you know, the word bitch. Inside all of the programs, there's a slip, 14 great hip hop songs. I wanted to add way more, but I couldn't. And it has a lot of artists and songs that you can check out if you want to support these artists. I'm going to end with a piece, a little bit of a personal piece that I wrote, and it kind of addresses this issue. Because I'm a part of something bigger, a lyrical movement of rappers who make a difference with intelligent music, and we're coming out swinging. It's a hip-hop revolution. The rap that's on the radio is fiscal prostitution. We just want to help these kids in terrible situations live their fullest lives and get a college education, get away from that pain, get out of those broken homes. We just want to let them know that they aren't alone. Give a voice to the voiceless and help them become strong. So turn on those speakers and rap right along. Thanks.